only be applied in respect of a taxable person. Can only be applied in respect of a taxable person and not on any person. Then the second ground is that the period to which this offense, alleged offense of the company belongs is 1718, 1819, 1920, when this 122 1A was not there. So when the offense was committed, at that time this penal provision was not there, so how you can impose it upon us? And the third ground is that this provision can only be applied if someone has retained the benefit out of that transaction. So for a moment, I will also show you the provision. One moment. This is section 122 1A in front of you on the screen, which is highlighted. It says that any person who retains the benefit of a transaction covered under clause 1, clause 2, clause 7 or 9 of subsection 1 of section 122, any person who retains the benefit of a transaction covered under these clauses of section 122 subsection 1 and at whose instance such transaction is conducted, then he shall be liable for a penalty of an amount equivalent to the tax evasion. So I will come to the interpretation of this in my what interpretation of this provision is in my view at a later stage. First, I will tell you what the High Court held. So the ground of these petitioner was that since subsection 1A can only be applied to the clauses covered under subsection 1, and subsection 1 is over here, which can only be applied to a taxable person. So 122(1) says where a taxable person, let us say a taxable person is defined under section 2 as any person who is registered under section 22 or who is liable to be registered under section 24 mandatory registration, and who's, so let the company Shemaru Entertainment was registered under GST supplying goods or services. So Shemaru Entertainment who supplies any goods or services or both without issuance of invoice, or that is unaccounted sales, or who issues an invoice without supply of goods or services, that is bogus billing, or clause 7, who takes or utilizes input tax credit without actual receipt of goods or services, that is you are taking bogus credit under which this specific company was being penalized, or who takes or distributes ISD credit fraudulently. So a taxable person who conducts any of these 4 transactions can be penalized under 122(1), and their ground was that 1A can also only be applied to that taxable person only. The petitioner's ground was this. The second ground was that the period to which this offense belongs, at that time 1A was not there. So 1A was introduced in the law with effect from 1st of January 2022. And the third ground was, since the show cause notice is not able to establish that these 3 people have retained any benefit of the transaction undertaken by the company, therefore this 122(1)A cannot be applied. And that is how on these 3 grounds, the jurisdiction of the show cause notice served on these 3 people in their personal capacity was challenged before the High Court. Now the High Court accepted each of their grounds, said that each of their grounds is correct, and therefore they set aside this penalty from these 3 people in their personal capacity, which was 133 crore per person. There were incidental grounds also that the penalty on the company is 133 crore, but the penalty on these 3 people in aggregate is around 400 crore. So this is disproportionate. So there were several other grounds, but these 3 grounds were major, and the High Court accepted all of those grounds. Now, to discuss with what I wanted to discuss before you is, this is the entire case law. See, I concur with the views of the High Court with respect to the 2 findings that when the offense was committed, this provision was not there, so it cannot be applied to the petitioners. And the third, that since department is not able to establish how any benefit from the transaction was retained by these three people, the department is not able to demonstrate that any money has been transferred by the company to these three people or their relatives or so on, anyhow. So 122(1)(a) cannot be applied. But many of you will agree with me that with respect to the first ground that the petitioners urged and the High Court accepted the ground, I do not concur with the view of the High Court. 1A है क्या? 122. What is 122(1)(a)? 122(1)(a) was introduced by Finance Bill 2020 and implemented with effect from 1st of January 2021 to plug a loophole that was there in the law, to catch hold the mastermind, the kingpin of the entire tax fraud racket, who is never the person registered. What happens in bogus transaction is, let us say there is person Ram, Mr. Ram hai, and he wants to indulge into such type of transaction and gain benefit. Let us say he is taking bogus credit and then showing bogus exports and then encashing the credit. तो वो करता क्या है? वो अपने नाम से कोई एंटिटी फ्लोट नहीं करेगा. He will not be the proprietor. What he will do is, वो अपने घर में किसी नौकर को, हमने कई सारे ऐसे केस लॉस पढ़े हैं, किसी एक अंडर प्रिविलेज्ड पर्सन को पकड़ेगा वो, जिसको वो इन्फ्लुएंस कर सकता है, और उसका आधार कार्ड लेकर के और अदर क्रेडेंशियल्स लेकर के वो उसको रजिस्टर कराएगा और उसके नाम से फर्म ऑपरेट करेगा. और जितनी भी बिलिंग होगी या जो बिलिंग इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट की आएगी, वो उस पर्सन के नाम से आएगी, उस लीगल नेम से आएगी, कभी भी मिस्टर राम के नाम से नहीं आएगी. So what he did was, he made that servant the taxable person under the law. He registered that person as a proprietor under the law. And when the department busted the entire racket, they came to know that he is only the shadow, and the main person, the mastermind, is behind. But there was no provision under the law to penalize that mastermind. Although through CPC provisions, they were catching hold of those persons. It is not that they were escaping, but there was no direct provision in the law to penalize that person who is not in the front, but he is the mastermind. So they introduced this provision 1A, which says that any person, not any taxable person, but any person who, whereas under subsection 1, the terminology is a taxable person. So that can be applied only to a person who is registered or liable to be registered, who is supplying goods or services. But this 1A came for any person, the mastermind, who is retaining the benefit of a transaction, a bogus transaction covered under 122(1), under clauses 1, 2, 7 or 9, and at whose instance such transaction is conducted. It is the mastermind at whose instance the entire evasion is being organized and orchestrated. Then he shall be liable to a penalty equivalent to the evasion. So through this provision, they caught hold of the mastermind. And if the view taken by the Honorable High Court, Bombay High Court, in this decision is taken, then that mastermind will always be able to escape saying that I am not the taxable person. Because the High Court says that the term any person employed in subsection 1A has to be construed as a taxable person, because under 1A, the 1A is substantially linked to 122(1). And since 1 applies to taxable person, therefore 1A can only be applied to a taxable person. And through this technical interpretation, they say that it cannot be applied to any person. See, I am not on the point that whether these three persons in this case were guilty or not. They must have been not guilty. That is why the department was not able to prove that any benefit of the transaction was accepted by them or came to them from the company. But I am on the principle whether this provision can be interpreted as such, as interpreted by the Honorable High Court in this judgment. I do not wholly agree to the view that is taken by the High Court, what I wanted to express before you. Now, Gopal, do you want to discuss or add anything with respect to this case law?
Siddhant, while I completely concur with your views, that this, except for this point, they must not have been guilty. The department has not been able to prove one or two more things that we need to understand or we need to take care, because when if we read the views that any person should be linked to the, or if we read this in that way, in a way the honorable high court has done, then it will have impact. It may have impact on the other provisions also. There are few places, for example, the RCM notification, at some places they are saying any person, recipient being any person. So we should read this any person uh, literally the way it is mentioned, and not like it should be linked to 122.1. Even the memorandum to finance bill 2020, it explains that the beneficiary, that they want to catch hold of the beneficiaries. So whoever is the beneficiary, whether it is registered, unregistered, taxable, non-taxable, irrespective of that, if Siddhant, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible. I think my connection got
I
lost
think
in middle.
there was some technical issue. So the point that I'm on, how we understand this term beneficiary, to what extent, so if a professional is charging a fee for a particular advice or a transaction, now if that transaction happens to be a fraudulent transaction, now to what extent can department say that you are involved in this transaction and you are a beneficiary of transaction, and how do we as a professional take care of these kind of situation, that we avoid any controversy with or any litigation with respect to this?
Yes. So, Gopal, in my humble opinion, and most of even you and most of us will agree, see, an advocate or a chartered accountant giving consultancy to a client for a particular amount of fee would not amount to gaining the benefit out of that transaction, retaining the benefit out of that transaction. I also, anyways, it will depend on the facts of the case, but merely giving a consultancy with respect to a particular transaction and charging a fraction of a fee, or let us say a fixed fee, does not amount to retaining the benefit. See, in this case also 130 crore evasion was done. Now you cannot say that if a advocate or a chartered accountant would have given his legal view on a particular issue within this transaction. Of course, I'm not saying that he would have given a bogus view. He would have said that if you take the invoice, then credit would be admissible, even without underlying goods or services. ऐसे तो कोई भी consultant, if he has given a legitimate legal view and he has charged a consideration, whatever XYZ it may be, then it cannot be said that there are two important things in this provision. One, that you retain the benefit from that transaction, and at your instance, the transaction must have had happened. तो क्या मतलब है कि एक तो जिस भी एंटिटी ने ये फ्रॉड ऑर्केस्ट्रेट, जिस भी एंटिटी ने ये फ्रॉड किया है, उसका बेनिफिट किंग मास्टरमाइंड को आ रहा है, और मास्टरमाइंड के माइंड एप्लीकेशन की वजह से ऑन हिज डायरेक्शन दिस एंटायर ट्रांजैक्शन वाज ऑर्केस्ट्रेटेड. सो अ प्रोफेशनल कैन नॉट बी इंडिक्टेड or charged with this clause very easily unless he is himself the mastermind. That is what I wanted to submit.
Fine, Siddhant. I think we can move on to next case.
Yes. Let me share my screen again. And later we can have a discussion with the participants as well, as if they want to discuss anything on this particular case law itself. We are
Yes,
having
yes.
4 or 5 case laws only. Then we
Most
can
welcome
open the
participants.
forum. Yes. Now the next issue is also very interesting, and as professional, I will say that it is very important for us for as professionals. It is very important provision, and it has been consistently helping in litigation, the extended period of litigation. This provision has been there since the inception of excise in some or the other form, and then service tax, and now the GST. 73 versus 74, what we call in GST. Normal period of limitation versus extended period of limitation. And now with effect from 24, 25, they have introduced a common provision, that is 74A. That is for the very first time since the inception of indirect taxation. Prior to that, there were two separate provisions. Although 74A is in the same shape, that is that used to be there prior to that in 73, 74. It is just that they have made a common provision, common timeline. There is no normal or extended period of limitation, but penal provisions are same. 10% under normal scenario and 100% under fraudulent scenario. Now, this is the order of a CSTAT West Bengal, but time and again we have seen these judgments. I have taken several judgments from CSTAT Delhi or CSTAT Allahabad in these type of cases. What particularly happened in this case, and this is also happening in GST, and if we understand the concept, it will help a lot of us in catering our clients. What happened was, department proposed a demand by issuing a show cause notice in this case simply on the basis of finding a difference between ER1 and ER4. Now, what is ER1? ER1 is like GSTR1 in excise, where you disclose your dutiable supplies. What is ER4? ER4 is like GSTR9 in GST, that is annual return that you file, and you file various information in that. Now, the excise department issued a show cause notice to this entity simply on the basis of a difference identified between these two returns, and they proposed the demand. And also, while doing that, they had to invoke the extended period of limitation because normal period of limitation had already time barred. Now, it was adjudicated against the assessee, as usually happens. Then this demand traveled to the CSTAT in appeal. In pre-GST regime, there was a difference, stark difference, that if the demand was more than 2 crore, it was adjudicated by a commissioner and the appeal directly traveled to CSTAT. Whereas in GST, even if the demand is 200 crore, it is to be adjudicated by a joint commissioner or an additional commissioner, and the appeal will travel to commissioner appeal. If the demand is up to 2 crore, it has to be adjudicated by an assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner, and the appeal will travel to joint ADC appeal or a JC appeal. So this is the hierarchy. So in GST, there is always a first appellate authority, but in this case, the appeal directly traveled to CSTAT. Now, when the case traveled to CSTAT, there were two limited grounds. First, that the demand cannot be proposed merely on the basis of identification of a difference between two returns. And secondly, that even if this exercise is valid, then it has to be undertaken within the normal period of limitation because the returns were filed timely. And there is no excuse with the department to reconcile these figures beyond the normal period of limitation and then serve the show cause notice. Now, the tribunal has dropped this entire show cause notice on ground of limitation, and also acknowledging that a demand cannot be based merely on the basis of, this is the para 8 conclusion of the CSTAT. We find that in this case, it is a fact on record that the appellant was filing their ER1 and ER4 timely. The demand raised in this case is based solely on the basis of difference between ER1 and ER4. And then they have explained what is ER1 and ER4. Admittedly, the returns were filed in time, and the impugned show cause notice has been issued by invoking extended period of limitation. In these circumstances, we are of the view that extended period of limitation cannot be invoked, as the figures were reported by the appellants in their ER1 and 4 within time, well within the knowledge of the revenue. Therefore, we hold that demand in the show cause notice is not sustainable. They also note in this line that ER4 returns are nothing but average financial statements of the appellate company on the basis of which the demand cannot be raised. Now, you have understood this case law, but what we take from this case law to GST, there are umpteen number of show cause notices that have been issued since 2017-18, and till date they are being issued on the basis of a difference found between two returns, say GSTR1 or GSTR9 or GSTR1 or 3B. It could be anything. Now, my first point is, and I always take this ground, that merely on the basis of a difference identified between two returns, say GSTR 1 and GSTR 9, you cannot propose a demand. Unless the department is able to establish that the difference represents a consideration received in lieu of a taxable supply, it cannot propose the show cause notice, straight away saying that this difference is amenable to tax. There are not one or two or 10, but more than 100 judgments of CSTAT on this particular point. I had 1 month back, I had a similar case. I filed before CSTAT a compilation of 30 judgments that a show cause notice can never be proposed simply on the basis of difference between two returns without doing proper verification how that difference is leviable to tax and recording those facts in the show cause notice. They cannot do this. And the sanctity of the show cause notices that has been issued in the very recent past in GST, just doing mathematical comparisons and giving it to you, that is a system show cause notice. It is very remotely likely that they will sustain. And we have seen it in the first judgment of the Honorable Tribunal of GST 80, that they have said that you cannot invoke extended period of limitation in such cases. And they have also remanded back the case, saying that just on the basis of difference, you cannot issue a show cause notice. So this is very important for us as professionals to understand, to take a ground that what the department is doing without establishing a taxable event, without establishing that the difference is representing a consideration for a taxable supply. They're just proposing the demand on the difference. What is this? This is not a show cause notice. Yes, this difference can lead to an inquiry or a scrutiny under Section 61 or an audit under Section 65, but you cannot directly straight away issue a show cause notice. Show cause notice is, and you are leveling an allegation. That allegation has to be backed by an inquiry verification. You're not doing anything. You're just proposing a demand on a difference. So that cannot be done. And secondly, let us say the department issued you the scrutiny notice and you were not able to submit the reconciliation. Even then, the department can serve you a show cause notice, but under Section 73 only, not under Section 74, because your returns were filed timely. GSTR 1 and 3B and 9 were filed timely. You did not make any delay or any extraordinary delay that the department was unable to issue you a show cause notice within time. So since your returns were filed timely, you had reported everything timely, it was the duty of the proper officer to do that reconciliation within time. There have been circulars in the central excise on this particular point, that it is the obligation, in as much as it is the obligation of the assessee to do the self-assessment properly, it is the obligation of the officer to do the reconciliation of returns within time. If not, then they cannot invoke extended period of limitation simply on this unreconciled difference. So that is what I wanted to highlight before you all, that please keep in mind these case laws and these principles when you're contesting a case. Gopal, I would request you to
Siddhant?
add anything if you want to.
Yes, yes. So this is the very favorite practice of the department, especially in
Yes,
GST, and in the mismatch regarding the 1 3B or 2A 3B. Uh, at least in 2A 3B, I have seen most of the cases department issues show cause notice in 74. Now, this judgment is definitely helpful, as you have mentioned that there are n number of judgments. Even from the Supreme Court, there is a judgment in Reliance Industries that says in case of self-assessment, the assessee is required to disclose based on his belief regarding the interpretation of law and all. Now, but department says when there's mismatch in 2A 3B, simply there is one case when the department does not have the time under 73, so they issue notice under 74 as a last resort. But even for the period when they have time limit within 73, they proceed under 74 just by saying that you have not disclosed the fact. Any issue related to 2A, whether it's non-filing of GSTR 3B by the supplier, or whether the supplier is cancelled registration retrospectively, in all the cases, department issues notice under 74. Now I think there's a circular in, I think March 2017, dated March 2017, circular 1053,
exactly.
which says,
1073.
that says if the department is already aware of a particular fact, they cannot issue a show cause notice under extended period of limitation. They cannot issue show cause notice under extended period of limitation when there is a when there is a interpretation dispute. So there are many pointers mentioned there about the extended period of limitation. Now, in case of 2A 3B mismatch, when I filed my GSTR 3B for a particular period, let's say for April 2020, now department has got my 3B, the ITC that I have claimed, department has got the 2A for that period generated. Even the portals shows the difference between 2A 3B on real time basis. Once I file my 3B, it gets there on the tax comparison table. But now after a longer period, department says you have suppressed. How there is a suppression, that is anyway not clear. So this judgment should be helpful, and there are many other judgments also. And the demand cannot be made at all. That is one a different takeaway that we should take. कि एक तो आप 74 नहीं लगा सकते, पहली बात तो आप डिमांड कर ही नहीं सकते merely because there is a mismatch. Now, recently, I have seen 3-4 cases where department simply mentioned ITC as per 2A, ITC as per 3B, kindly pay by this date, and they have simply issued show cause notice. No pre-show cause notice intimation, no ASMT 10, nothing. Simply issued show cause notice under 74. So these kind of cases, judicially भी time भी जा रहा है, tribunal में भी there are most of the cases that are traveling to tribunal, GST 80 as of now, I understand are based on the mismatch between 1 3B and 2A 3B. So these kind of cases should be helpful.
Yes, of course. Initially, these type of cases will only travel because 1718 largely this has happened. Or while state GST authorities pan India have issued such show cause notices under section 73 only because they are quite proactive. Whereas when it comes to center, they have multiple things. They have service tax adjudications going on during that period, and then central excise adjudications, and then customs as well. So since they say that we have limited resources, they were not able to do this within normal period of limitation. They have issued such show cause notices on differences under section 74 only, but that can never sustain before the tribunal. When you refer to circular 1053, yes, master circular pertaining to show cause notices issued under central excise regime, very helpful even in GST. And there is an instruction number 52 issued under GST, which also refers to that master circular of central excise. It is with respect to a particular point, the Northern Operating Minerals judgment that came from the Supreme Court. So with respect to that judgment, they have issued an instruction, but they have explained that when section 74 can be applied, and then they have referred to circular 1053 saying that if the department has to invoke 74, then the department has to set out and record all the facts and reasons in the show cause notice itself, why they are issuing show cause notice under section 74. So, and we have seen that what the department does, they make a standard para that had this been not investigated, this difference not been reconciled by us, the assessee would have evaded tax. And since we have got this unreconciled difference, it is a fit case for 74. But no, absolutely wrong. That invocation will never survive. You had the returns filed in time, you could have reconciled them within time. And now you are saying that since we have detected it and it would have gone undetected if we would have not done any exercise, then 73 becomes redundant. Then there is no need for 73. You only have 74. So that reason would never sustain. So that is what, and as professionals, we must master this difference between 73 and 74. There are thousands or 10,000s of judgment since central excise on this issue, and show cause notices of crores of hundreds and crores of have been dropped simply on the ground that extended period of limitation could not be invoked. And tribunal favors the assessees on these grounds if they are able to justify the that invocation is wrong. So we must, as professionals, we must master. Sometimes the facts are not in favor, but this technicality is in our favor. So with this, I think we have discussed a lot on this.
Yes,
Gopal,
just one small point to add. When we talked about this instruction 5, that also specifically mentions that the department has to provide a material evidence regarding
yes,
the
yes.
allegation of fraud or suppression.
And that
But they
onus is
don't,
on the department to prove that invocation of section 74 is
yes,
there.
I don't remember any show cause notice in whatever number of cases I have dealt with that they have given any evidence, much less a material evidence. They have not given any evidence.
Right, right, right.
So that also one thing.
And in my last in 9 years of practice, I've just seen one show cause notice which was issued under section 74, but then the commissioner accepted that this is not correct, and they dropped the invocation of section 74, and since they had the time to pass the order under 73, they confirmed the demand but under section 73. So we have seen that these issues only travel to tribunal. Prior to that, nobody accepts that section 74 is not invocable from being pro revenue officers. Anyways, let us move forward to the next
Yes.
case law. Yes. Again, this is also interesting. It is pertaining to restaurant industry. Gopal had highlighted me this AAR 2 days back. Now, although this issue was clarified by Circular 164, correct, Gopal? Yes, Circular
Yes.
164. What this applicant is, this is an advance ruling from Gujarat, wherein this applicant is intending to open some restaurants in the state of Gujarat in multiple cities. Now, what his question was that, particularly with respect to ice cream, that if there were multiple type of combinations that he made, that if I get the ice cream manufactured outside the restaurant premises and then sell it over the counter at the restaurant, then would it qualify as a restaurant supply or a supply of ice cream as goods? Now, the difference is, if you supply restaurant service, then it is taxable at 5% without credit. And if you supply ice cream as goods, earlier it was taxable at 12%, but now with effect from 22nd September 2025, it has been made taxable to 5% with ITC, because in goods, we are entitled for ITC even in concessional rates. So that was the question. The next question was, if that ice cream is manufactured, let us say outside the restaurant or even inside the restaurant, but it is then being used to make some dishes such as kulfi faluda, which is being served at the restaurant, or milkshake, which is being served at the restaurant. Then third question was, if this ice cream is being made at the restaurant and served to dine-in guests, or they are taking it away to their premises. Then these four questions were there in this advance ruling. I am putting it to you briefly. What the advance ruling has correctly held, that considering the circular 164, that only in a situation where the ice cream is made outside the restaurant premises and it is being supplied as such over the counter at the restaurant, only in that case it will qualify as supply of goods, taxable at 5% with credit. In all the other scenarios, let us say ice cream was made at a manufacturing premises outside the restaurant, and then it came to the restaurant, and then it was served at the restaurant along with other dishes, or even served at the restaurant as a dine-in, then in that case, it will be considered as a restaurant service, taxable at 5% without ITC. If that ice cream, whether made outside or inside, is served to the dine-in guests, it will be treated as a restaurant service. Even if they take away that ice cream without sitting over there, but it was made at the restaurant, inside the restaurant, because the basic principle is, if the cooking is done at the restaurant, then it will always qualify as restaurant service. If the cooking is within the restaurant premises, preparation of the ice cream is within the restaurant premises and not outside, then it will always qualify as a restaurant service, whether you have it within the restaurant or whether you have it outside the restaurant, you take away it. Secondly, if it is used in the preparation of other dishes, such as kulfi faluda, or let us say milkshake at the restaurant, it was manufactured outside, even then it will qualify as a restaurant service. So in nutshell, only in one scenario, that the ice cream was made outside the restaurant and then it came to the restaurant and supplied over the counter to the customer. For example, many a times we go to these, now the dhabas have been made at an international level standards. They are not no more those dhabas which used to be there 10 years back. Whatever havelis are there at the Delhi Punjab stretch, when you go to these restaurants, they have ice cream stalls of Quality Walls or Baskin Robbins. So when they are selling those standardized packaged ice creams over the counter, it will be treated as supply of ice cream, taxable at 5% with ITC. But if that ice cream is being prepared at that very restaurant and it is being served to you along with other dishes or even standalone, then it will be treated as taxable at restaurant service. If it is being used for preparation of rabdi faluda or kulfi faluda or any other dish, milkshake, and that is being served to the guest over there, then it will be taxable as restaurant service. So this is limited discussion with respect to this ruling. Gopal, I would request you to add anything if required. This was already clarified in Circular 164, and on that basis only, aligning with the circular, they have issued the ruling.
Yes. So Siddhant, just two small things. One is when the ruling says that manufacturing outside the retail unit. Now the restaurant chains, they have a centralized manufacturing unit. They are bringing it to their retail outlets and then they are selling. Whether this will apply to them also, that it will qualify as supply of goods, or because
Yes.
the chains will not have the manufacturing facility at all the retail outlets. They are manufacturing at a centralized unit and then they are selling it over the counter or supplying. So whether this will ruling will be squarely applicable to those cases also. And the second question that I have in my mind, whether the similar principle can be applicable to pastry or the other products similar to some which has a similar process of manufacturing and supplying. So whether this will be applicable to those cases also, because this circular is specific to ice cream parlors.
Yes, Gopal. So the circular
Yes,
is
Siddhant.
specific to ice cream parlors. To answer your first query, if there is a centralized manufacturing facility from at where the ice cream is being prepared and then it is being transferred to the restaurant outlet, either for over the counter sale as a packaged ice cream, or even it is being served to the guest, it will qualify as supply of ice cream only. That is very well clear from circular 164, because it was manufactured outside the premises and it is just being served at the restaurant. It is not being prepared or cooked at the restaurant. So the major element is, if that ice cream is being prepared at the restaurant itself, cooked at the restaurant itself. Let us say we go to McDonald's and they serve McSwirl. So that is being prepared at McDonald's store itself. So that will qualify as a restaurant service. But there was a very popular case of Gyani's ice cream parlor in Delhi, after which this circular had come. Their ice cream, they have centralized manufacturing for certain ice creams which are not Sundays, and they are getting manufactured at some other place, and then they are being supplied at the restaurant. Either the I go and take it away, or it is being served to me at the restaurant. So in that case, it is supply of ice cream. So it depends on facts to facts. Let us say they are getting the chocolate ice cream from outside. Gyani's is getting the chocolate ice cream from outside, and then it is giving me the chocolate ice cream as it is to me, the scoop of chocolate ice cream. It is supply of chocolate ice cream as goods. But if it is using that chocolate ice cream to make a sundae and then serving it to me, then it is a supply of restaurant service. So this is the difference. So we have to understand the facts in depth, what are there, depending upon the case to case. But the major point that circular intends to clarify is, if the ice cream was manufactured outside and it is being brought to the restaurant and it is being served as it is, or it is being sold over the counter and the customer goes, in those both limited cases, it will be supply of ice cream as goods, because nothing happened at the restaurant, no cooking, no preparation.
Fine, fine, fine.
So
Siddhant, we can, I think
move
then we
on to
can
the
move.
next next case law. Gopal, would you like to open it? It is
Yeah,
Tucson
not a
Power.
problem. Or we can discuss updates also, because if the
Already it is
participants have,
12:50. Hmm.
yes, yes. So we can take up one or two queries also post that.
Right. You can
So
discuss the update. That is up to, because
yeah, so there's
remaining two case laws are very procedural case laws. Nothing much to discuss. Yes. Hmm.
right. So we can discuss one quick update. There's no legal update as such, or there's no much of updates on the portal, but there's one update on the portal. So from November 2025, as per Rule 14A, the government introduced a simplified registration scheme. So normally what happens in GST registration, when we apply for the registration, there is a long process of physical verification. Department asks for document, they visit the site and all. So those things are there in the normal registration scheme. But with effect from November 25, the Rule 14A was introduced, and Rule 14A specifically provides that there is an option for the taxpayer who have a monthly output tax liability below a particular threshold limit, which is I guess 2.5 lakhs B2B transactions. There's no limit on the B2C transaction, but for B2B, if your output tax liability is less than 2.5 lakhs per month, so you can opt for the simplified registration scheme. And in the simplified registration scheme, as per my experience and others also have experienced, that the registration is approved in 3 to 4 hours and the registration number is granted. So that scheme was there. But there's a caveat on that scheme, that if you opt for that scheme, you cannot withdraw from that scheme unless you have filed your returns for a period of minimum 3 months. So if you opted for the scheme in November, आपने अगर नवंबर दिसंबर जनवरी, if you have not filed GST returns for 3 months, so basically 3 months is the minimum time limit that you have to stay within that within that simplified registration scheme. But now, after November, December, January, when the 3 months passed, those who wanted to withdraw, the portal did not have any such facility. But now the portal has given the facility. You can apply for the withdrawal from this scheme. But once you apply for the withdrawal from that scheme, as of now, there is no specific clarification or guidance how this withdrawal will happen, what will be the requirement from the department in terms of verification and all. But yes, once you withdraw from this scheme, the department will verify the same in accordance with the provision of rule 9, that is the normal जो registration के verification वगैरह होता है, department will verify your withdrawal application in terms of rule 9. And if the officer is satisfied that it is a case of registration, it fits for the withdrawal, then department will allow the withdrawal, or department can reject also. And there is a time limit within which the department will do. So this is the update on the portal. If anybody is eligible for withdrawal from this that scheme, they can apply for the withdrawal, and subject to verification, this they'll be converted to normal registration. Or how these things will happen practically, it is yet to come. So this was from the updates part. Siddhant, if any specific thing that you have in mind on this particular aspect.
Gopal, I think you have clarified the issue. Nothing to add from my side on this point.
Yes. So we can take one or two queries also. I think there was one query. Siddhant, you wanted to discuss any particular query that you received?
These days, the prominent query that I am getting from my clients is with respect to the compensation cess, which has been lying in electronic credit ledger since 22nd of September 2025 in the applicable cases. So let us say there is a restaurant which has been procuring Coke from Coca-Cola, and then there is an input tax credit of compensation cess, which they were able to utilize at the time of supply on over-the-counter sale of Coca-Cola cans. But with effect from 22nd September 2025, as we all are aware, the cess has been abolished and they are not able to utilize it. Likewise, in the automobile industry, this is a bigger hue and cry because the dealers who had purchased the cars from the manufacturers, they are having the credit of cess lying in their credit ledger. And when PM Modi had announced on 15th of August that the rates will come down, at that point in time, the people had stopped buying cars. So there were no sales during that period from 15th of August till 21st of September. And only during the Navratri time, the sales boomed. And we saw all over the media that even the Mercedes claimed that we are able to sell. I think they said that in every 10 minutes we have sold a car. That was the scale of sales over that period. But what happened at that time, they sold the cars because everyone wants to sell as much as possible. But now the thing is, they have a parked, blocked credit of compensation cess. These dealers have a blocked credit of compensation cess, which is lying in their credit ledger, which was an asset for them till 21st of September, but became a cost for them after 22nd of September. Strangely, although these dealers have automobile through Automobile Association of India have subsequently filed a petition before the GST Council, since the council has not sat since then, it has not been discussed, and strangely, no clarification has also come. And the statutory provision of compensation says that The input tax credit of compensation cess can only be utilized towards the output tax liability of compensation cess. It cannot be utilized towards output GST, that is CGST, SGST, or IGST. So that has become a dead asset for them as on date. Now the question is coming from the clients that what should we do as on 31st March? How should we report it in our balance sheet? Till date, till last year, it was an asset for us. Now it is not clear as to what will happen tomorrow. The government, the council may come up with some type of special scheme that you can use this credit to an extent against the output tax liability, or you can get the encashment of it to an extent, whatever. Till date, it is nothing there. There is nothing official. It has, for now, it is a cost for them. So, what I have been advising to my clients is that if the that what you do is you report it, you debit it as a cost to your P&L for now, because as on 31st March, there is no foreseeable benefit that can accrue to you from this dead asset. So therefore, it can no more be shown as an asset in your financial statements, and therefore you debit it to your P&L. Tomorrow, if the government, and you also reverse it on the GSTN portal, tomorrow, if the council 10% chances or 20% chances, if the council comes up with any scheme, special scheme, because you will be able to recall that when education cess and special education cess were abolished, at that time they had come up with a clarification that you utilize this credit of EC and SHEC from the service tax or central excise, you adjust it. तो इस तरीके का जब तक कोई क्लैरिफिकेशन नहीं आता, इट इज अ कॉस्ट एंड दे हैव टू कैपिटलाइज इट और दे हैव टू डेबिट इट टू देयर P&L as on 31st of March. That is what my advice is, and at least claim the expenditure part or claim the depreciation under the Income Tax Act. Whatever benefit you can gain, you can gain. So that is what I wanted to highlight before everyone. Yes, Gopal, you can now carry forward.
Siddhant, just one thing regarding this, when we talk about the education cess also, so in the Sutherland and a few other judgments in the transitional credit case, so when we transitioned from the erstwhile law to GST law, the transitional credit provisions earlier allowed and then they got retrospectively amended to disallow the credit of education cess being transitioned. So many assessees or the many taxpayers have taken an argument of the promissory estoppel. So whether that will have any impact on the cess with respect to the motor vehicles that we are currently, the challenge that we are currently facing, that we were accumulating the credit with an expectation that we'll be able to utilize it with the output. So whether the doctrine of promissory estoppel will apply here, if you can highlight something on that
So,
in brief.
Gopal, what my view is, see, anyways, these automobile dealers, because their stakes are quite high. Forget restaurant, the stake is not high. I am talking
Right.
about big restaurant chains. Even there, I have seen that stake is not high. But particularly in case of automobile dealers, the stakes are quite high because the cess used to be 22% on big cars, up to 22%. So where the stake is high, they will certainly be litigating it. They will not sit idle, they will be litigating it, and there the judgments of Eicher Motors and Da Aichi Karkaria from Supreme Court at the under the excise regime, where a similar situation had happened. On a particular date, the government had exempted the particular goods. I think the tractors were there or something, agricultural tractors were there. They were exempted from excise duty. And the dealers were told that they will not be able to utilize the input tax credit of the SENVAT credit of the raw material or the inputs they bought for manufacture of those tractors. So at that time, they challenged this provision and they succeeded before the Honorable Supreme Court, wherein Supreme Court said that once they procured the raw material and the inputs on payment of excise duty, and they have satisfied all the conditions of the law at the time of procurement, then that becomes their statutory right, and then that statutory right becomes their vested right, and therefore they cannot be barred with this credit. So that judgment had come in Eicher Motors. That is a landmark judgment. Everywhere it is quoted whenever it is with respect litigation with respect to input tax credit. So relying on those judgments and many others, of course, the automobile industry will not stop. They will litigate this, and only the time will tell whether they will be able to succeed before the Honorable Supreme Court or not. That is my view with respect to this issue.
Fine, Siddhant. One query I had received. So especially because the GST 80 is completely new and there are procedural differences from the CSTAT, but I guess we'll carry some experience from CSTAT also to GSTAT. Now in GSTAT, the query that I have been receiving from clients as well as other professionals also, whether the filing of affidavit is mandatory for all the cases when we are filing GST 80, or whether it is only for filing the additional evidence which we have not filed before, or additional documents, or whether for certifying any specific documents such as any documentary evidence with respect to any transaction. So such as or say interlocutory applications. So in my, because for the early hearing petitions and all, there are specifically affidavits is being filed. Interlocutory applications के लिए GST 80 procedure rules also says that you file an affidavit. But with respect to the other cases, when we are filing the, so say for example, we are simply arguing on the point that the appellate authority's order is not is say non-speaking, or it is not correct for the only for the grounds that we had taken before the appellate authority itself. So I think we don't need to file an affidavit separately. It is required for the applications that we are bringing out facts that we had not introduced earlier. But with the leave of the tribunal, we are bringing out these facts or evidences. Uh, any input from your side, Siddhant, on this?
I agree with you that only in special and limited situations the affidavit will be required as laid down in the law rules. In every other case, for filing a regular appeal where you have taken the grounds before the adjudicating authority as well as the first appellate authority, there would be no such requirement. What I would like to discuss over here is one point that is coming to my mind is this has been discussed in the first case as well, the judgment that has come from GST 80 in the case of what's the name? Sorry, I'm forgetting. It is Gopal. Can you recall the name?
Which
The
one? The
last,
first case?
the first case.
Some Wills.
Wilson, Wilson. So in this case, what they have discussed, what they have highlighted is so there was a particular fact that had not been brought before the adjudicating authority as well as the first appellate authority, and it was with respect to reconciliation, and the whole demand was based on reconciliation itself between GSTR 1 and 3B. So what tribunal, well, the revenue contested that they cannot bring an additional fact at this stage. What tribunal is emphasizing and holding on that point is that the tribunal is the ultimate fact finding authority, and therefore even if a particular fact could not be brought due to certain reasons or any other reason before the adjudicating authority or the first appellate authority, the tribunal can accept that fact at that stage. The tribunal will consider that fact and tribunal will discuss that fact and then tribunal will pass the order. So this was a very important, uh, although that discussion is very limited in that judge order, but they have stressed upon it that being an ultimate fact finding authority, they have the right to entertain a fresh fact at that stage as well. That is what I wanted to point out, Gopal, from that judgment.
Yes, Siddhant, very rightly put. There are two, three questions in chat also. Rakesh ji, there's no PPT. We have been discussing from the case laws directly. There's no PPT to share. And then Ashok Jha ji, what will happen to invoices already uploaded in GSTR 1 in past month? What will happen to these invoices under Rule 14A? So, sir, as
ये
mentioned,
गोपाल जी थोड़ा
हाँ
सा
जी,
मैं इसका बैकग्राउंड अगर दे दूं तो ये
यस यस
सर्विस
अभी,
टैक्स का इनवाइस ना हमने नवंबर में गलती से 14A का रजिस्ट्रेशन ले लिया। वो
हम्म
10 लाख के लिए हमने सर्विस टैक्स का 10 लाख टैक्स लायबिलिटी के लिए सर्विस टैक्स की मतलब सर्विसेज के लिए इनवाइस रेज हो गई, जिसका
हम्म
कि हम अब क्रेडिट नोट भी नहीं कर सकते कि जो गुड्स रिटर्न भी नहीं है, सर्विस
हम्म
डिफेक्टिव भी नहीं है, वो जो सेक्शन 34 में लिखा है। तो
हम्म
अब वो क्या हो गया है, वो ई ई इनवाइसिंग के थ्रू जीएसटीआर 1 में चला गया है, लेकिन रिटर्न फाइल नहीं हो रही है क्योंकि 2.5 लाख से ऊपर लाइबिलिटी है। तो उन इनवाइसेज का क्या होगा, 5 मंथ का हमारी इंटरेस्ट बन जाएगी कि लाइबिलिटी बन जाएगी क्या, हम उसको जीरो रिटर्न करके 3 रिटर्न फाइल करें, क्या करें गोपाल जी? थोड़ा ये था मेरा। क्वेश्चन।
आइडियली तो देखिए सर, जब आपकी 2.5 लाख से ऊपर है तो आप रजिस्ट्रेशन उस रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए एप्लीकेबल एलिजिबल नहीं है।
जी जी,
अभी
वो गलती
आपने
से ले लिया गोपाल जी, हड़बड़ी में, किसी को
अमेंडमेंट।
उस
नहीं,
टाइम
बट
पता नहीं था।
इनवॉइस
जी
आपने
जी।
गलत बना दिया या फिर आपने फिगर्स गलत डाल दिए जीएसटी रिटर्न में।
लेकिन रजिस्ट्रेशन गलती से ना, वो उस टाइम क्या था, इतना हल्ला हो रहा था कि 2 दिन में मिल जाता है, 2 दिन में मिल जाता है, तो उन्होंने अप्लाई करके गलती से ले लिया जो क्लाइंट ने।
सर
अब वो
देखिए,
इनवाइस जब रेज करी, तब बाद में पता चला कि ये 2.5 लाख की वजह से फाइल नहीं हो रहा है, तो
सर
ये।
देखिए, अगर आप
जी जी।
प्रोविजंस के हिसाब से देखेंगे तो प्रोविजन के हिसाब से यू आर नॉट अलाउड फॉर दैट। और
यस
अगर आप
यस, दैट
प्रोविजंस
इज।
और आप प्रोविजंस की अगर आप हार्मोनियस रीडिंग करेंगे तो
जी 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 गोपाल जी।
वंस यू हैव ऑप्टेड फॉर दैट तो 3 महीने तक आपको वो अलाउड ही नहीं है। तो लीगली तो वो चीज आपके लिए परमिसेबल नहीं थी। अभी आपने वो
वो
ले लिया है।
आपका म्यूट हो गया गोपाल जी।
सर मेरी आवाज आ रही है? सिद्धांत, एम आई ऑडिबल?
यस यस, यू आर ऑडिबल।
अशोक जी, आपको आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
पहले गोपाल इनसे ये पता करिए कि ये ट्रांजैक्शन रिपोर्ट हो गई है जीएसटीआर वन में, बट हो ही नहीं सकती है वो रिपोर्ट, तो
दैट
फैक्ट
हाँ
क्या है,
दैट
थोड़ा
इज
क्लियर नहीं हो रहा। हाँ।
दैट इज व्हाट आई वाज कमिंग टू, कि इन्होंने आई थिंक ई इनवॉइस रेस कर
वो
दिया।
अनम्यूट कर लीजिए गोपाल जी।
अशोक जी, गोपाल जी अनम्यूटेड है। आपको शायद आवाज फिर भी नहीं आ रही है, कोई टेक्निकल इशू आपके एंड पे है। आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
अशोक जी, एक काम करते हैं, आप ये क्वेरी को फिर आपसे सेपरेटली डिस्कस कर लूंगा, तो हम बाकी
व्हाट
क्वेरीज एक
वो
बार टेकअप कर
वो
लेते हैं।
मतलब अगर प्रिंसिपली डिस्कस करें तो आई थिंक उनके केस में केवल इनवॉइस रेज हो गया है, ई इनवॉइसिंग हो गई है, बट वो रिपोर्ट नहीं कर पाए होंगे उसे, क्योंकि वो पोर्टल तो वो लेगा ही नहीं ना, 2.5 लाख से
वो
ऊपर की
सिद्धांत जी,
ट्रांजेक्शन।
उनका आवाज नहीं आ रहा है।
तो सिद्धांत, आई थिंक ना व्हाट ही इज सेइंग कि ई इनवॉइस से ऑटोमेटिकली जीएसटीआर वन में उन्होंने पुल तो कर लिया, बट जीएसटीआर वन उन्होंने फाइल नहीं करी। दिस इज व्हाट आई अंडरस्टैंड।
हाँ, वो फाइल नहीं तो उसको वो करेक्ट करके फाइल कर देना।
करके फाइल कर दे वो, फिर जीएसटीआर वन में अभी रिपोर्ट नहीं होगी, बट देन ही विल हैव अ लिटिगेशन कि वो इनवॉइस रेज हो चुकी है बट वो इनवॉइस रिपोर्ट नहीं हो रही है जीएसटीआर वन में।
वो एक्सप्लेन करना पड़ेगा कि गलत ई इनवॉइसिंग क्रिएट हो गई, बट एनीवेज ही हैज टू रिपोर्ट द करेक्ट फिगर इन द रिटर्न, नीड नॉट रिपोर्ट अ रॉन्ग फिगर जस्ट बिकॉज ई इनवॉइस वाज जनरेटेड रॉन्गली।
नो नो, ई इनवॉइस वाज जनरेटेड करेक्टली, उन्होंने रजिस्ट्रेशन गलत ले लिया 14A में।
अच्छा, so
हाँ,
then there is a problem. So
देन देयर इज अ
basically, what has
प्रॉब्लम
then
उनको।
there is a problem. He cannot
आइडली
report that transaction.
आइडली ही हैज टू राइट अ रिप्रेजेंटेशन टू द डिपार्टमेंट एंड से कि भाई मैं उस मंथ में तो कर नहीं सकता, मैंने रॉन्गली ले लिया। इमीडिएटली ही हैज टू विदड्रॉ दी फ्रॉम सिंप्लीफाइड रजिस्ट्रेशन स्कीम, एंड उसको करेक्ट मंथ, अभी के मंथ में रिपोर्ट करके विद इंटरेस्ट एंड जो भी आता है वो पे ऑफ कर दें।
हाँ, एक टैक्स की विलिंगनेस लेटर लिखें डिपार्टमेंट को, अपने जुरिस्डिक्शनल कमिश्नरेट से डिस्कस करें कि ऐसा ऐसा सिचुएशन हुआ है। आई हैव अप अच्छा, आई थिंक मनीषा कुमार वो सेपरेट क्वेरी, तो अशोक जी आप एक बार जुरिस्डिक्शनल कमिश्नरेट में जाकर के बेसिकली यू आर विलिंग टू पे द टैक्स, इट इज जस्ट दैट यू हैव अप्लाई रिसीव्ड अ रॉन्ग अप्लाइड फॉर अ रॉन्ग रजिस्ट्रेशन एंड देन यू हैव रिसीव्ड दैट, और जिसमें ये ट्रांजैक्शन रिपोर्ट हो नहीं सकती है। तो अब आपको करेक्ट रजिस्ट्रेशन, तो आपके केस में एज पर रूल 14 है क्या होगा कि आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन कैंसिल किया जाएगा, वो उसको डिपार्टमेंट रिवाइव नहीं करेगा एनीवेज, और जब आप विड्रॉल का एप्लीकेशन अप्लाई करेंगे और फिर आपको नया रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा अलग से, और फिर ये टैक्स डिपॉजिट करना पड़ेगा। तो एक बार अपने कमिश्नरेट से सारी फैक्ट्स को डिस्क्लोज करके डिस्कस कर लें। अगर किसी तरीके से ये टैक्स और प्रायर जमा हो सकता है तो आपका इंटरेस्ट का मीटर भी स्टॉप हो जाएगा, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, बट एक गलती हुई है तो उसको अपने कमिश्नरेट से डिस्कस करके ठीक करा लें। I have applied for GST registration under Rule 14A and I want to withdraw, but department said you cannot withdraw within 6 months. But as per Rule 14A, yes, you cannot withdraw before 3 months. 6 months की तो लिमिट नहीं है. And this limit is also till 31st of March 2026. 1 अप्रैल से ये लिमिट शायद 1 मंथ की होने वाली है. But prior to that, of course, in your case, 3 months limit will be applicable. और इसमें एक और बार है कि आप जब तक ये रजिस्ट्रेशन प्रिवेलिंग है आप एक और रजिस्ट्रेशन सेम स्टेट में नहीं ले सकते। तो इन योर केस यू विल हैव टू फाइल अ विड्रॉल एप्लीकेशन, एंड देन वंस दे कैंसिल योर रजिस्ट्रेशन देन यू अप्लाई फॉर अ फ्रेश रजिस्ट्रेशन एंड स्टार्ट कंप्लाइंग। यही अशोक जी के केस में भी होगा, व्हाट आई फील।
तो आंसर मनीषा जी इस क्वेरी 3 months इज द टाइम लिमिट। अगर ऑफिसर से आपको कन्वर्सेशन करनी पड़ेगी, एज पर लॉ इट इज 3 month, तो ही शुड अलाउ यू, एंड पोर्टल हैज ऑल्सो इनेबल्ड द फैसिलिटी।
राइट, ये अंकित पटेल की कोई क्वेरी, एनजीपीटी सप्लायर्स, व्हाट इज एनजीपीटी सप्लायर्स?
आई थिंक इज टॉकिंग अबाउट एनजीटीपी, नॉन जेन्युइन टैक्स पेयर्स।
अच्छा, नॉन जेन्युइन टैक्स पेयर सप्लायर्स। देखिए, केस लॉस तो अभी ट्रिब्यूनल तो फंक्शनल हुआ, यू कैन ओनली हैव जज। अभी एक चीज मैं बड़ी क्लियर कर देता हूँ, जो भी जजमेंट्स आ रहे हैं जो हाई कोर्ट से आ रहे हैं, दीज आर ऑल जजमेंट्स अंडर रिट जुरिस्डिक्शन। पहली बात तो रिट जुरिस्डिक्शन में जो जजमेंट्स आते हैं, दे हैव अ परसुएसिव वैल्यू बट दे डू नॉट हैव अ बाइंडिंग वैल्यू, and they are applicable to the applicant only as far as bindingness is confirmed. Yes, you can quote them as having a persuasive value. Secondly, नॉन जेन्युइन टैक्स पेयर के केसेस तो अभी दे विल ट्रैवल टू ट्रिब्यूनल एंड देन द जजमेंट्स विल स्टार्ट कमिंग। तो आप जितने नॉन जेन्युइन टैक्स पेयर के केस लॉस हाई कोर्ट से आ रहे हैं, दे आर ऑल a type of judgment wherein the high court is remanding back the case for de novo adjudication to the department. In none of the case they have given complete resolution or they have set aside the order. Yes, they are setting aside the order on some technicality, saying that this action is wrong or that action of the department is wrong, but then they are giving liberty to the department for de novo adjudication. तो ये जो भी चीजें चल रही हैं एज ऑन डेट की हाई कोर्ट में चले जाओ और क्वाश करा लाओ, वो ठीक है, एज एन एडवोकेट प्रैक्टिस बहुत अच्छा समझ में आ रहा है, दिखाई दे रहा है ऊपर ऊपर से, बट अल्टीमेटली हो क्या रहा है? हाई कोर्ट केस को खत्म तो कर नहीं रहा, हाई कोर्ट कह रहा है, लिबर्टी दे रहा है डिपार्टमेंट को कि आप फ्रेश एडजुडिकेशन करो। देन द ग्राउंड विल कम कि 73 टाइम बार हो गया या 74 टाइम बार हो गया इन टूडेज डेट। बट ये सारी अब जैसे जीएसटी आईटी फंक्शनल होता जाएगा, हाई कोर्ट विल स्टॉप एंटरटेनिंग दीज रेट्स and only the appellate jurisdiction should be exercised. ठीक है, unless and until there is a fatal jurisdiction lag, you should not go to high court directly. That will not save you anything. जो आज की डेट में जो डिपार्टमेंट गलतियां कर रहा है आपके केसेस में, शो कॉज नोटिस में, ऑर्डर्स में, आप उसको हाई कोर्ट पे जाके एम्फेसाइज करोगे तो हाई कोर्ट रिमांड बैक कर देगा, सेट असाइड करके ये कहेगा कि डिपार्टमेंट फिर से करो। बट इफ यू डोंट गो टू द हाई कोर्ट, यू फॉलो द अपीलेट रूट, and in that scenario the tribunal will quash the order itself. It will not say that you do the de novo adjudication. ये जो टेक्निकल इन्फॉर्मिटीज हैं, कई सारी ऐसी केसेस मैं देख रहा हूँ हाई कोर्ट से जो आ जाते हैं, हाई कोर्ट रिमांड बैक करके ये कह देता है फिर से करो। बट इफ यू वुड हैव गॉन थ्रू द अपीलेट रेमेडी, then in many cases the tribunal will set aside the orders.
यस अंकित जी, आप ट्राइब्यूनल जा सकते हैं, आपकी फर्स्ट अपीलेट अथॉरिटी के ऑर्डर के अगेंस्ट में आप ट्राइब्यूनल जा सकते हैं। ट्राइब्यूनल विल गो ऑन द टू फैक्ट्स ऑल्सो। ट्राइब्यूनल इज द अल्टीमेट फैक्ट फाइंडिंग अथॉरिटी। तो इफ यू आर नॉट, if there is something that you want to challenge in the appellate authorities orders, APL 04 के अगेंस्ट में आपको जाना है, तो आप उसमें ट्राइब्यूनल में जा सकते हैं। देयर इज नो स्पेसिफिक बार। इनफैक्ट ट्राइब्यूनल में ही आपको जाना है अपीलेट मैकेनिज्म्स में। For the fact finding, you cannot go to High Court. High Court will only entertain the questions of law, but tribunal में you can go.
ओ गगन जी, वो अशोक झा बोल रहा हूँ। मेरे को ना वॉइस नहीं आ रहा था उस टाइम जो बताया था। तो मेरे केस में क्या रजिस्ट्रेशन पुराने 14 वाला कैंसिल कर दें और नया ले, या उस इनवाइस को क्या करें सर? वो मेरे को
सर
पता नहीं चला, आपका इनवाइस नहीं आ रहा था किसी टेक्निकल की वजह से। एक बार और
सबसे
रिपीट कर दीजिए।
गोपाल, इनके केस में यही होगा कि इनको
जी
ये
सर।
एप्लीकेशन रजिस्ट्रेशन विड्रॉ करना पड़ेगा, वो रजिस्ट्रेशन डिपार्टमेंट कैंसिल करेगा और नया एप्लीकेशन फाइल करके नया रजिस्ट्रेशन लेकर के फिर रिपोर्ट हो पाएगी वो सप्लाई।
ओ 32
और
में
राइट।
विड्रॉ नहीं कर सकते सर इसमें? या
इसमें विड्रॉ
उस इनवाइस को
हाँ,
कैसे फाइल करेंगे, या कैंसिल ही करना पड़ेगा इसको?
इसको मैं इसलिए कह रहा था क्योंकि ये अब आपके अभी 3 मंथ्स एक्सपायर नहीं हुए होंगे या 3 मंथ्स एक्सपायर हो गई है,
हो गए सर, ये
तो
फरवरी
आप
महीना में हो
आप
गया
आप
सर।
विड्रॉल अप्लाई करो, अपने कमिश्नरेट से डिस्कस करो वहां पे जुरिस्डिक्शनल ऑफिसर से कि ऐसे ऐसे गलती से रूल 14A में रजिस्ट्रेशन अप्लाई हो गया था, वेयर एज आर सप्लाईज आर एक्सीडिंग द थ्रेशोल्ड, तो
सर
वो
वो 3 महीने
गलत।
की रिटर्न फाइल करने के लिए बोल रहा है।
हाँ, 3 महीने की रिटर्न नील की फाइल करो, वो उसमें वो वाला इनवॉइस तो आपका रिपोर्ट ही नहीं हो पाएगा ना, जो 2.5 लाख रुपए से एक्सीड कर रहा है, वो तो पोर्टल ले ही नहीं रहा होगा।
ले GSTR 1 में ले रहा है सर, 3 भी नहीं हो रहा है। ये
नहीं,
बात हो गई है।
वन फाइल हो गई है।
वन फाइल नहीं हो रही है, लेकिन उसमें चला गया है, मतलब जो ई इनवाइसिंग हुई ना, तो उसमें
अगर
चला गया है।
नहीं तो
ऑटो
अगर वन फाइल हो गई है सर, पहले ये फैक्ट क्लियर करें।
नहीं, फाइल नहीं हो रही है, क्योंकि वो चला जरूर गया है लेकिन क्लिक नहीं हो रहा है, सबमिट नहीं हो रहा है।
हाँ, तो वो अब आप डिपार्टमेंट को ये एक बार ना डिपार्टमेंट से डिस्कस कर लें, ये थोड़ा सा प्रोसीजरल इशू हो गया। आप कहो मेरी टैक्स मैं पे करना चाहता हूँ, अगर आप कहो
ओके
मैं DRC 3 से पे कर देता हूँ इसे, उसमें कोई
ओ
इशू नहीं है, मेरा इंटरेस्ट
ओके
मीटर
सर।
भी स्टॉप हो जाएगा अगर मैं टाइमली DRC 3 से पेमेंट कर दूंगा। बट
जी जी।
रिटर्न फाइल नहीं हो पा रही है तो मैं क्या करूँ?
ओके ओके।
है
फिर
ना,
वहां से वो
प्रोसीजरल
जैसा
इशू है।
प्रोसीजर
हाँ,
बोलते हैं
तो आप
कैंसिलेशन के
इसको
लिए।
कैंसिल कर दो, मैं नया रजिस्ट्रेशन अप्लाई करता हूँ और फिर उसकी रेगुलर कंप्लायंस कर लूंगा। इस वाले इनवॉइस की मैं टैक्स पेमेंट या तो इस इनवॉइस को वहां पे फिर से रिपोर्ट करके टैक्स पे करूं, या फिर DRC 3 फाइल कर दूं। तो वो एक बार डिपार्टमेंट भी थोड़ा सा आप डिस्कस कर लो, क्योंकि ये रूल 14A में कई सारे इश्यूज आ रहे हैं जिसपे अभी क्लैरिटी है नहीं।
जी जी बहुत सारे आ रहे हैं सर। जी
हम्म।
जी।
बट
ठीक है।
इसको
सबसे
जल्दी
पहले बट
डिपार्टमेंट से डिस्कस करके रिजॉल्व करा लो, अदरवाइज इंटरेस्ट मीटर आपका कंटिन्यू रहेगा, वो
बिल्कुल सर
प्रॉब्लम है।
बिल्कुल। ठीक है सिद्धांत सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
वेलकम। So can you share the circular related to SCN for difference between two returns? सर्कुलर तो सेंट्रल एक्साइज में है, और सर्कुलर ये नहीं कहता कि डिपार्टमेंट शो कॉज नोटिस इशू ही नहीं कर पाएगा दो डिफरेंसेस पे। इस पे CBIC की एक इंस्ट्रक्शन है, मैं शेयर कर दूंगा गोपाल के साथ, जो कि 2017 में ही आई थी, कि केवल डिपार्टमेंट डिफरेंसेस के बेसिस पे शो कॉज नहीं इशू कर सकता। दे रेप्रिमांडेड दैट एक्सरसाइज। तो वो है। And then there are number of judgments which say that you cannot issue the show cause notice on the basis of difference, and then extended period cannot be invoked। वो पूरी compilation में शेयर कर दूंगा गोपाल के साथ।
Siddhant. So I think Siddhant, we can wrap up for today.
In
It
fact,
was
Gopal,
really
if you say, I can right away, because I am having that compilation ready, तो मैं यहीं पे attach करके, I think it will save time।
तो सिद्धार्थ वो हम ग्रुप में भी भिजवा देंगे एंड
अच्छा ठीक है।
हाँ जी हाँ जी हम ग्रुप में
हाँ तो
भेज
ग्रुप
देंगे, वो
ग्रुप
कोई
में शेयर
दिक्कत।
कर लेंगे, ठीक है ठीक
हाँ दैट विल शेयर, दैट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम।
है। ओके।
So we'll wrap up for today, and it was really a wonderful discussion. And we'll connect again on next week, next Saturday. So thank you all for joining today. Thanks, Siddhant.
So please clear Rule 86B on which department is raising demand. This is another problem. Rule 86B, you cannot utilize more than 99% of the credit. 1% वही issue है ना ये? हाँ।
Yes,
So
yes, yes. 1% tax liability in cash.
1% tax liability in cash. This, although this is applicable to very limited number of small assessees, because majority of the assessees get covered under the exclusion. But in cases where it is there and you have utilized the ITC, my view is either the department, what department can do, now you have utilized that credit and that was legitimately utilized credit. But the thing is, in your case, the department wanted that at least 1% of the tax should have come in cash. So in my view, the department can ask you for the deposit of tax liability in cash in today's date along with interest, but they should refund you that credit.
Refund.
They should refund you that credit and there should be no penalty. And even interest can be contested on the point that I could have, what credit I debited, I could have utilized that in the next month or subsequent period, but that I debited. So although interest is never said once you admit an liability, ये भी एक पॉइंट होता है, तो मैक्सिमम टैक्स आपको कैश में पे करके, और इंटरेस्ट की कॉस्ट लग सकती है आप पे, बाकी जो क्रेडिट आपका गलत डेबिट हुआ था वो तो डिपार्टमेंट को वापस देना ही पड़ेगा, वो डिपार्टमेंट का प्रॉपर्टी नहीं है। दैट वाज अ legitimately availed credit, it is just that you did wrong utilization। and then this rule 86B itself is in challenge before various high courts, but वो पुश नहीं हो रहा है क्योंकि ये छोटे एसएससीज हैं जो इसके राइगर के अंडर आ रहे हैं। सो दैट इज व्हाट इज देयर।
इसमें एक और चीज भी देखी जा सकती है, ऑल्दो दैट विल डिपेंड ऑन अ लॉट ऑफ फैक्ट्स, बट 86B के जो पुराने पीरियड के केसेस थे, एक तो लॉ में इट वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड वेरी एट अ वेरी लेटर स्टेज, एक्ट में इट वाज नेवर इंट्रोड्यूस्ड, इट वाज डायरेक्टली थ्रू रूल्स, तो दैट चैलेंज कैन बी seen, and based on the facts it can also be seen if the department is raising demand under 74. So when there is a revenue neutral situation, because I could have utilized my ITC for subsequent period, and there are other judgments also which says that, like we discussed, कि returns mismatch hai. 86B is very clearly visible in the month when I am filing whether I have complied with 86B or not. So those things department can, those things also we can contest, but that will depend on fact whether we can contest the applicability of 74 or not.
Yes, yes, of course. And then
Right.
while contesting this particular issue, there are judgments of Madras High Court with respect to Rule 9610 and 89.4
Yes.
small clause B. वो भी सिमिलर रूल्स हैं जहां पे कि वो एक अननेसेसरी रिस्ट्रिक्शन लगाते थे कि इफ यू आर प्रोक्योरिंग द गुड्स अवेलिंग सर्टेन कंसेशनल नोटिफिकेशन बेनिफिट्स ऑफ
एडवांस
कस्टम्स और
ऑथराइजेशन
समथिंग,
एंड ऑल।
या आप मर्चेंट एक्सपोर्टर हो 0.1% पे परचेज कर रहे हो और फिर आप एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हो तो आपको विदाउट पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स अंडर एलयूटी करना है। बट कई लोगों ने उसको विद पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स कर दिया, रूल 9610 को इग्नोर कर दिया जो कि रिस्ट्रिक्ट करता था। तो उस केस में डिपार्टमेंट पहले क्लैरिफिकेशन ये आई कि भाई आप टैक्स का आपको आप उस रिफंड को वापस करो और हम आपके क्रेडिट जो आपने यूटिलाइज किया था टैक्स की पेमेंट के लिए उसको आपके क्रेडिट लेजर में वापस कर देंगे, लेकिन आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना पड़ेगा। बट दैट वाज अ वेरी एब्सर्ड क्लैरिफिकेशन, उसने वो पेमेंट करी है और रिफंड मिला है तभी मिला है। तो
राइट।
then that rule was omitted, rule 9610. So Madras High Court recently has come up saying that once the rule was an unnecessary issue and it has been omitted, so it cannot be applied to the period when it was not omitted. So वहां पे उन्होंने कहा है कि अगर किसी को रिफंड मिल गया है तो वो उसको मिल गया है, देयर इज नो नीड टू टेक इट बैक। सो इस तरीके से ये जो जजमेंट है इसको आप 86B में भी रिलाई अपॉन कर सकते हैं। सर
राइट।
रिफंड किस सेक्शन में अप्लाई करेंगे? मोर ओवर 2 years टाइम एक्सपायर्ड इन माई केसेस। देखो अगर एक्सपोर्ट और आईडीएस का रिफंड था और आपका 2 साल निकल गए हैं तो एक्सपोर्ट में तो मैक्सिमम आप ये कर सकते हैं कि अब उसको विद पेमेंट ऑफ
सिद्धांत,
टैक्स एक्सपोर्ट कर दें।
सिद्धांत सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट, आई थिंक वो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का रिफंड की बात कर रहे हैं जो हमने यूटिलाइज ऑलरेडी कर लिया
आईटीसी,
86B के केसेस में।
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा।
हाँ।
रिफंड किस सेक्शन में अप्लाई करेंगे? देखो रिफंड तो आपका ऑटो, जब आप टैक्स की पेमेंट कैश में कर दोगे तो देर इज एन एक्सेस पेमेंट
एक्सेस पेमेंट।
क्रिएटेड when you made the payment through credit, so that you can apply anytime, and in that a case of excess payment time limit under section 54 cannot apply। डीएमआरसी जजमेंट दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट कि अगर कोई टैक्स बियॉन्ड द अथॉरिटी ऑफ लॉ एक्सेस पे किया गया है तो उस पर डिपार्टमेंट कोई भी टाइम लिमिट नहीं लगा सकता। सो रिलाइंग अपॉन दोज केस लॉज एंड देन ऑल्सो सेक्शन 77 और जो 19 वाले केसेस है वहां पे भी को कहते हैं कि अगर गलत टैक्स को सही आपने, ऑल्दो दैट इज अ डिफरेंट सिचुएशन ऑल टुगेदर, यहाँ पे कवर नहीं हो रही है स्क्वेयरली, बट दोज प्रोविजंस कैन ऑल्सो बी साइटेड कि जब मैंने सही को टैक्स को पे कर दिया है तो अब यहां से आप 2 साल अप्लाई करो मेरे क्रेडिट के रिफंड के लिए। दैट इज एन अनदर आर्ग्यूमेंट। सो दैट रिफंड
एक्सेस
हैज टू
पेमेंट,
कम।
एक्सेस पेमेंट के केस में वी हैव दिस नोटेड जजमेंट ऑफ मफतलाल आल्सो, द
मफतलाल,
ओल्ड
हाँ
जज।
पुराने। उसके बाद
हाँ।
उसको रिलाई करके डीएमआरसी आ गया जीएसटी में, तो दैट कैन
राइट
बी
राइट
अप्लाइड।
राइट।
तो
सो
इन
दैट,
दिस के प्रोसीजर विल बी ऑफलाइन, नहीं आप एनी अदर कैटेगरी में रिफंड अप्लाई करो, ऑनलाइन ही अप्लाई करो बिकॉज द मोड इज ऑनलाइन, ऑफलाइन आपकी रिफंड एप्लीकेशन को कोई एंटरटेन नहीं करेगा।
राइट। थैंक यू राहुल जी, थैंक यू एवरीवन फॉर योर wonderful interactive session, and thank you Siddhant for wonderful
थैंक यू
discussion. And we'll again meet on next Saturday with similar discussion on different case laws, different queries. Thank you all.
थैंक यू एवरीवन।
Thank you Siddhant.